Welcome everyone to the Shopify Techstack Audit with Oliver Rhodes. Today, Oliver, the founder of Aalto Projects, will guide businesses on optimizing their Shopify tech stacks for maximum e-commerce success. Before I turn it over to Oliver, I'd like to quickly introduce Replo. Replo is a visual web development platform that allows teams to create beautiful, high-performance landing pages on Shopify without the need for developers. Replo is light years ahead of other page builders when it comes to customization and page speed. And we have a library of hundreds of proven landing page templates that anyone can use, as well as certified experts who can help build custom pages in just a few days. So I'd like to thank Oliver for hosting the event and for providing his expertise, and wanted to thank everyone for showing up today as well. And so without further ado, let's dive into the world of Shopify tech stacks. Thanks, Oliver.
Sweet. Thanks, Justin. Can people talk, or are they forced onto mute? Are you able to?
Yeah, everyone's able to unmute on their side here.
Everyone's able to unmute. Cool. Hi, Jackson. Hi, Jason. Patrick. I don't know if I know you. Roberto. We've met before. I remember when you were at Unimart. I don't know if you're still there. Keegan, you messaged me the other day. And hi, Vic. So yeah, just to kick off, I think first things first, Vic's actually joined. She is my business partner at Nolo Apps. So I started out doing tech advisory, tech stack consulting 13 months ago. Prior to that, I'd worked at a warehouse system called PeopleVox. So I did that for going on 10 years. And it was whilst I was selling PeopleVox to merchants that I realized that in order to sell a warehouse system, you needed to be able to explain the tech stack to the people that you were trying to sell your thing to. I think having knowledge of how to architect a tech stack is a massively underrated skill. I think that even some people selling ERP solutions lack the broader knowledge of the e-commerce ecosystem, which is needed to sell their thing. And if you can get your head around how to pull these different solutions together, then you're able to, if you work for a brand, you're able to be extremely valuable and lead, the bigger digital transformation projects that involve changing 2, 3, 4 systems at a time. Or if you're on the consulting side, you're able to offer something that pretty much every brand needs help with. Be it $1 million, $2 million upwards. Everybody seems to struggle with this tech stack stuff. So yeah, what I'm going to do today, I'm going to spend like half an hour just going through some of the different tools that I use. I put them together in such a way that I really want it to be possible for any of you who have joined to actually either go and like rebuild these tools or put these things into practice. I'm trying not to bamboozle you. I want to make it as simple as possible. Hopefully that comes across. If it's still a bit confusing, just stick your hand up and interrupt me. And yeah, I'd like questions. If people have got questions, that would be quite useful. Otherwise, I'm going to have a really lonely 50 minutes talking to myself. I don't know if I'll be able to last that long. So yeah, I'll go through the bits I prepared, and then what I thought would be cool to do was just pick up some of the subjects, and then we can just talk through how we might solve some of those issues. So yeah, that's I think that's a good intro overview. So I guess yeah, first things first. I'm a massive advocate for visualizing things. When you're trying to go about making complex change in a business, I think it's far too easy to get into the nitty gritty and start writing up all of the like processes and things that you need, almost like a checklist in a Google sheet. I find it very, very hard to use a Google sheet to sell an idea to people. It's a great way to do the diligence, but you're not really going to sell a change to someone using a Google sheet, and it requires them always to go down to that like finite level of detail when actually they just need that bigger high level view. So I'm a big advocate for Miro. I think FigJam is like equally as good. But just using one of these tools to visualize stuff is really kind of step one for me. And before you even go into visualizing a tech stack, one of the concepts that I came up with when I first started doing tech stack consulting was the one I'm going to kind of kick into first. So rather than thinking about the normal thing of like how the systems all fit in together, what I wanted to do was look a bit more at how do systems flow across an organization. Because as well as companies needing like the right tech to enable them to do obvious stuff like get orders out the door or have accurate inventory, ultimately any brand that's trying to scale up needs to be thinking about how is they're hiring people, how are those people getting onboarded into the business, what systems are they using, which everybody's got that challenge in their business, so it's pretty easy to relate to. How are people communicating across teams? Like if the buying and merchandising team, if they use WhatsApp, do the design team also use that, or are they using Microsoft Teams? Like really basic stuff like that. And I came up with this idea of having a system of record, which is where like the central data is stored. System of action, which is where the actual work gets done. Specialist tools, which would be like for a warehouse team, a warehouse management system. Where's the reporting and analysis done? So based on those first three tool types, where do people actually go to get reporting and analytics? And then the fifth type is around collaboration, which is something that I'm really hot on, because everybody says, oh, of course, e-commerce businesses are siloed. And I think, well, that's a problem. It's not just an of course. That's something that we need to be trying to address. And I really see technology as being a really strong way to do that. So just to kind of zoom in on this in practice, how it actually looks. So you can see along the top, what I did was I just laid out the different functions of a business. So merchandising, design, development, buying, production. They're going to vary between companies, but I've actually got kind of a standard set of operational functions that I work to now. And then system of record for this example, Oracle NetSuite, specialist technology, they're using Looker for data analytics. System of action we're using Excel, reporting analytics in Looker, and then communication, dates, collaboration was Slack, Outlook, Calendar, Excel, WhatsApp. And you just roll this out across every function. And what I actually found, particularly within this example, was that there's just a massive over-reliance on using Excel files. And also the biggest killer in terms of time were the amount of PowerPoint presentations and reports that were being generated for reporting and analytics. So things like, a weekly trade report that was going out, or a delivery schedule, that would be taking 1 to 2 hours per week just to put that together, so that everybody in the company knew like what products were coming into the business that week. So yeah, it's a really, really simple tool. I don't do it with every client I work with now, but I think it's quite a useful way of just visualizing for people. Like I remember presenting this to a room of about 15 people, and you could see that they could get then how certain teams didn't have any technology supporting them, and how other teams had lots, and also the differences between the way that different teams were working and communicating with one another. Probably one of the most common things that comes up for me when I'm looking at technology across the whole business is you've got one group of people using Microsoft Office and you've got another group of people using Gmail. And I'm forever being asked, which one should we use? My kind of canned response is you just need to pick one. But typically what I'm finding is that often the people working within e-commerce brands, generally speaking, from my experience, aren't as tech savvy as, say, the people who are working for a software vendor. And so whilst you may have, most web agencies and software vendors that I'm aware of, lots of people in that kind of startup space gravitate towards Gmail. I tend to find that actually Microsoft Office is possibly a better choice for brands, although I would absolutely hate to have to use it day to day myself. That's kind of system types, I guess. And then the other thing I use is a really simple visualization of tech stacks that I came up with, and I actually had as a free project called Techstack Pro, where I had, I think there's like 12 different examples of tech stacks using all different apps and tools across the Shopify ecosystem. I'm going to run through this specific example because it's a really common tech stack that I've seen in my time, primarily because I was selling a warehouse management system for 10 years. So this was a tech stack that was very popular and also one I was seeing a lot. We rolled this out with brands like Gymshark and Lounge Underwear when they were scaling from sort of 4 to 10 million up to 100 million for both of them. This tech stack took them that far. So the idea of this visualization style is that it's pretty easy when it's got the logos dropped in it. It makes it very easy to see how the different tools are fitting together. And if you show this to someone that isn't in your team, they can very quickly kind of see how it all fits together. The other thing that I like about it, particularly when we talk about a Shopify tech stack, and I don't know if this is really apparent to everybody, but Shopify is designed in such a way to really be the hub of an e-commerce business. And more what they're doing is moving the product direction towards enabling Shopify to be the core of an e-commerce business. And an example of this would be the introduction of the different inventory types. For example, now we've got committed inventory, something that we didn't have before. And they did remove negative inventory, which caused a bit of a riot. But I understand why they're going in that direction, having been part of a company that built an inventory system. So with that in mind, when you map out any Shopify tech stack, the thing you're going to realize is that it's very, very heavy on the front end in terms of Shopify apps. There's so much that is connected to Shopify. And I feel that the more information you can get into Shopify, particularly product information, the better placed you are to take advantage of the app ecosystem that connects into it. A specific example of that would be making sure you've got an accurate landed item cost going into Shopify against every single product. We know if you get an accurate landed item cost into Shopify, then if you run your reports in something like Triple Whale off the side of that, it's already going to have an accurate landed item cost when you start running those reports. You don't need to sort of consider, it's just got a dumb, item cost. It's not a real item cost in there. So thinking about things like that. So on this tech stack in particular, this is where it's probably a good place as well for me to introduce another concept that I talk about a lot, which is the dark stack. So as well as having the tech stack up the top, down the bottom, there is the dark stack. And the dark stack for me was a bit of a revelation. I didn't realize whilst, in my 10 years doing PeopleVox, I didn't really realize that the number of Google Sheets inside a brand were a problem. For me, trying to sell my thing, they were actually often quite helpful because I'd get stuck on a particular feature and someone in pre-sales would say, it's all right. We can just, we can export that to a Google Sheet and then we'll change a few things and we can import it back in. And I'd go, great. Okay. That's going to work out just fine. But, when I went and did product lifecycle for a year, post PeopleVox, I started to realize how many Google Sheets there are across most businesses, particularly around the product lifecycle flow. So in this example of a dark stack here, going from the planning of collections and drops through creating products and SKUs, allocating barcodes, generating tech packs, tracking samples, calculating costings, putting pricing together, managing creating it in Dropbox, or doing your e-commerce copy, mapping in all your meta fields, doing all your tags. There's a number of Google Sheets in the flow. And then there's also Google Sheets in this tech stack for purchase orders and inbound shipments. And then tracking that flow from purchase to pay as well. So once we've actually received the goods, has the invoice come in and have we paid it, and making sure that gets reconciled. So the Shopify plus WMS 3PL stack, this is kind of ideal for any brand that just sells via their own website. And in particular, it's ideal for brands that create their own products. So, a fashion brand that sells their own t-shirts or does denim or whatever, those kind of things, or also, health and beauty brands would be quite good for them if they're making their own potions. But all of the contract manufacturing is external to their business, but the business is built around bringing new product in and taking it to market. That's a key component of their flywheel. And as a result of that, they're likely to be seeing some quite big peak sale periods and also big, intense demand around those launches of new products. And so they need this super lean Shopify WMS or 3PL tech stack to enable them to scale up and get lots of orders out the door. The problem with this tech stack, which I've seen many, many times over now working with a lot of PeopleVox clients, is that there is no single source of truth for product information. It's very hard to see where products are in their journey through the business. So at any time, if you're the creative founder of a brand, you don't actually know what's going on with products. And if you don't know where a product is, you don't know if it's made it into the range, then it's not made it into the launch. And therefore, it's very hard to make revenue if you don't bring the product to market that you plan. The landed item cost calculations won't be being done correctly because you can't, in most WMSs, you can't split the cost of freight across the items that you're receiving in, although you can receive in against the purchase order. There's likely to be no source of truth for purchasing. It's hard to know what's coming when. If you need some kind of advanced purchase order shipment level visibility, for example, if you were selling pergolas and you wanted to be able to show on your website where exactly those pergolas are in the containers floating around the ocean, it'd be very hard to do that with this tech stack. The product development workflow, as I taught you through, is all in Google Sheets, and it's definitely not suitable for multi-channel. So kind of a first example of solving this, and probably a good intro into the other half of what I do and what Vic does, and I help her do, is use Airtable, which is a low-code solution to build apps that solve specific challenges. In particular, eliminate the need for Google Sheets and roll many, many Google Sheets into very few Airtable databases and then optimize the workflow. So in this example, fixing product information at the source, let's say we're going to start there. Kind of makes sense to fix product information before we fix some of the other challenges around the supply chain. Product really is the core of a brand. So if you're making your own products, that is the thing that you really do need to get right, because ultimately you're going to grow if you keep developing winners and you stay close to your customers and you're innovating in the right ways. If your products go stale, as any marketer knows, it's way harder to sell a product that isn't great to customers. And likewise, if your quality slips, that can cause challenges as well. So the priority for me with this tech stack would be bringing in a system to fix product information and also manage the product lifecycle. So you could do that by implementing a PLM, product lifecycle management tool, and you could implement a PIM, so product information management tool. So a PIM example would be something like Akeneo. A PLM example would be something like Centric. The challenge that I've seen for a lot of brands that are trying to get off this WMS to 3PL tech stack is that jumping from lots and lots of Google Sheets and an unstructured process to an enterprise grade PIM or PLM is that their processes aren't mature enough to make the kind of decisions that you need to make to go all in on a solution like that. So this is where we use Airtable to build out like really specific capabilities so that we can basically pick off Google Sheets and eliminate them one by one or two or three at a time, rather than trying to implement a big, 3-month project that goes across 4 different operational functions and can all start to create those challenges around project fatigue and project management that we all know can be an absolute killer. So that's where I would start with that tech stack, try and fix the product information at source. If you had to choose between having a product information management system and having a product lifecycle management system, I would probably fix the product information management system first. And I would look to do the product lifecycle management using something. You could build your own tool in Airtable. You could do something in ClickUp or Monday.com or Asana. A lot of that tracking stuff you don't need a specialist tool for, but certainly unless you've got a specialist helping you with it, it's going to be very hard to integrate your data from a low-code database into Shopify to automate the PIM stuff, whereas there are PIM solutions that work off the shelf. And then to fix the PO shipment solution, this is where this area has been getting so much investment in terms of new tech in the last 12 to 18 months. So just off the top of my head, you've got kind of a long-standing product in that category would be something like Inventory Planner. But there's also Cogsy. There's another one called Singuli. There's Optiply from the Netherlands. There's literally tons of them. I think I've got a list of about 8 or 9 that I'm sort of working my way through. So people have realized that there's lots of brands out there that are running a Shopify WMS 3PL stack, and the kind of the requirements for this part of a system are that, first of all, you need a tool that's going to tell you what to buy. So it needs to look at your Shopify inventory levels, and it needs to look at your rate of sale and consider things like how many you sell despite the fact you are out of stock for 3 days. And it gives you a real rate of sale. It's going to recommend replenishment to you. And then it's also going to or if it can tell you what to buy, then it's going to help you to generate the purchase orders. And then from purchase orders, what it's going to help you with is inbound shipments. And the need for inbound shipments is one of the biggest reasons for investing in this particular category of product, which I'd call like inventory planning, merchandising. Having shipments enables you to take a PO, and it depends actually. So if you raise POs and you always receive a purchase order in full, you're very lucky. But most people don't receive their purchase orders in full. They part receive. Did someone have a question there? I just heard a squeak in the background. So most people don't get their purchase orders in full. They'll get a part shipment. And what you want to be able to do is tell your warehouse or tell your 3PL exactly what they're going to receive. And that is an inbound shipment. If you don't have an inbound shipment tool or a system that you can create, what most brands end up doing is going onto the 3PL system, manually creating an inbound shipment for the 3PL to receive against. And they need that inbound shipment so that they can reconcile against that. And you can know that they've reconciled against the shipment. It's no good sending them an entire purchase order, then reconciling against the purchase order. And then you have to sit there, reconcile the item to a shipment that didn't exist to a purchase order. So it's a really important area. And I think it's also attracted a lot of investment because there was a hell of a lot of brands that came out of the back end of COVID and invested in stock based on the golden gut of the founder, and have now found themselves bit by bit being weighed down by that stock and the cost of keeping it. And I think the number of brands that have been in heavy sale is probably a good testament to that. Bringing in tools for this area eliminates the need for purchase orders in Excel, eliminates the need for shipments, automates the goods receipt process, and it could also help with the purchase to pay tracking. So that is a really, really good and valuable addition to any workflow. The other bit you can do is also take the shipment information or take the goods receipt note that you receive back from the 3PL and upload it into your accounting system. If you use Xero, for example, there's a really good software called Approval Max, which can be used to upload those goods receipt notes into, and then they become your PO that is logged in Xero, automating that workflow. And that would be how you would then also take care of the purchase to pay tracker. Because if you upload the GRN and then you take the invoice from the supplier, you can upload it into there, match the two together, and approve the payment to your supplier. So yeah, hopefully you're following along. 100% sure I am. And then I thinking what else. And then I got the kind of final combined solution. So this is just an example of how it could be done in Airtable. I wouldn't say without knowing someone's business that it's the best way. But I would say it's absolutely possible and has been done with great effect for some companies. Does anyone have any questions so far?
I would love to open it up to folks and see if anybody has, wants to talk through their stack, and Oliver can certainly help out and provide recommendations and help answer any questions.
I've got a question, if that's okay.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm looking at 3PLs and various bits and bobs like that at the moment, and one thing I'm looking at is Ship Engine, and I wondered if yourself or anyone else had got experience with Ship Engine and or kind of new alternatives, perhaps.
Yep. So I think Ship Engine is the shipping API version of ShipStation, right?
That's it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I've got experience of it. It was a little bit newer to the market than some of the other shipping APIs. But what have you got any specific like doubts or concerns around it, or you building an integration? What are your thoughts on it? In terms of company, they're huge, and in terms of access to good value rates, yeah, it's a great way to go. And it's built for those more enterprise clients. So ShipStation obviously has been a bit used and abused. It gets used by companies up to, I've spoken to some huge companies running their whole warehouse on ShipStation. But Ship Engine was architected from scratch to be the enterprise solution and the shipping API to compete with things like Shippo.
That's interesting. The use case is as a client who have about 4 or 5 couriers at the moment, and are looking to expand that to probably around 10 or so. And they see, Ship Engine is the kind of fastest way to do that. So, and now it looks flexible on the surface, but we haven't really looked too closely. So yeah, that's good to know though, and it's good to know their size as well. I wasn't quite familiar with kind of their position. So yeah.
Yeah, they're pretty big. Let me just have a look at I've got a few shipping API solutions. Give me a sec. So, in this space, I would say, are they based in the UK?
Yeah.
Your client. So, I would probably say they're up there. I mean, it depends if they want. What you find, a lot of the shipping platforms have started to go wider and wider on their feature set. So, like, there's the need for printing shipping labels, but then there's also, some of them are starting to do the returns platform, and they want to do exchanges and kind of wrap all of that up together. So I would probably dig a little bit more into like, how are they doing returns and exchanges? Have they got a returns portal? Would that integrate and use the same label generation software as the software that's printing the shipping label? Because you may find that they end up kind of doubling up on some quite similar technology around printing labels. Possibly check on that, on whether Ship Engine's embedded in any other returns portals. I know EasyPost is used a lot by the returns platforms, and some of them integrate directly. But yeah, they've all kind of been bit by bit unbundling what Metapack did, which was kind of the all-in-one system from like, delivery options at checkout through to printing shipping labels and doing returns and things. Cool.
Yeah, cool. Cheers for
that. Anyone else?
I've just put a question in the chat there, Oliver. I don't know if you saw it pop up.
No, I haven't got Shopify B2B. How do I do it? It's a good fit. The DC and wholesale brand. What percentage of it?
They currently don't have any form of, it's all, like you say, dark stack, spreadsheets, handwritten, old school type account management, wholesale. But what they wanted to do is obviously optimize their processes and have some form of system. And I know this is your sort of bread and butter, and we're looking at it from we want to recommend the right solution that isn't going to duplicate the amount of work. We don't want to end up having to have two, because they're considering a solution that has like B2B and WMS built into one. And I know it's never a good idea when somebody offers two things that are sort of two different specialties, that it's never going to be a good solution. So I want to give them the correct sort of advice to look into. And I don't know if you've got any experience with Shopify B2B. They're already on Shopify as it is. So my initial thoughts were, okay, if they were to Shopify Plus, would they benefit from the B2B stuff without needing a specialist WMS and things?
It's back to that like starting point on Shopify, which is that if you're going Shopify, I'm always kind of pushing, you've going for homogeneous like that, the tech that's everywhere and used by everybody, you get all these great advantages by doing that, right?
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily about the first choice. It's that it's gonna keep your door open on many, many future choices. But as soon as you go for a more niche solution that's kind of like you said, like doing two things, you're possibly going to close yourself down to options in the future. It's going to make it a little bit harder. So I would think about for B2B in particular, I distinguish between wholesale and trade. So wholesale to me is that someone orders in advance of me buying stuff. So I haven't ordered anything yet, and they say, yeah, put me down for 500 of them. And you take a forward order from them, and then that goes as the purchase order. Whereas trade B2B would be that I've got items in stock and now I want to start selling it to trade customers. Which scenario have they got?
But they own the manufacturing facility as well. So it's probably a combination of both. They do have stock on hand, but they can also produce it, manufacture it as well, and have it delivered.
I'm gonna put them in the trade category, I think. And I think like a lot of people that look at Shopify B2B are going to find that it's missing features.
Yeah.
I think a really good solution I would recommend checking out in this category is Spark Layer. I don't know if you've looked into Spark Layer before.
No.
Do you know? So Spark Layer it's like a widget that goes over the top of the Shopify store and enables loads of B2B functionality. It was built by the guys who founded Bluebolt, the Shopify agency. Prior to that, they built their own e-commerce platform, and their own e-commerce platform was amazing at B2B. And then they realized, they couldn't compete with Shopify in terms of the B2C. And then they started Bluebolt, and then they identified, all of our B2B features are missing, but they knew exactly what was needed for B2B. So they've got about 700 Shopify clients now globally.
I think I remember seeing them on LinkedIn now that you've mentioned it.
Starts from not much a month. I've seen it go in at a smaller brand called Hair Choice Extensions. Have just implemented it, and it's gone really well. It does require, so it's kind of a bit of a self-implementation model, but it is a little bit more technical. Now, they're technical, so the documentation's great, but the documentation's a little bit above my pay grade when it comes to tech and development. So there's a bit of work to be done. You need Shopify development time. But I think it's a really great solution. There's also some possibility around stepping around the Shopify payment gateway on some orders. I don't exactly know the detail of how that works, but that's been another draw for it. So that would be the one I would hit up straight away. The other thing with the B2B side is to consider CRM. So getting a CRM integrated into their B2B side. I've used HubSpot a couple of times over now with Shopify. The integration is not amazing. Particularly like if you needed to get on the quoting route, I wouldn't use HubSpot, but in combination with Spark Layer, because Spark Layer does all the quoting, like it creates quotes as draft orders. So you could just go down that route with it. That would be my tip, actually. And draw it back in terms of like how I would position that case is to draw back to the, Shopify as your hub. It is the beast in the industry that you want to be riding off the back of, and you want to keep all your doors open, because this trade thing may change in 12 months, particularly if it's new.
Of course.
And then question from Jackson. Anything else, Jason?
No, that's perfect. Thanks, mate. Appreciate it.
So Jack, on the train, so can't turn the mic on. How would you determine the relevant software for a brand as they grow? I see it's a case by case. However, I see Oracle is referenced a few times throughout. And do you have a preference? Right. So my tech stacks that I've got as examples, the one thing I say is don't read too much into the logos and things that are used. It was just a lot of what I knew when I started, and I wanted to map out examples of tech stacks. But his main question is, where would you recommend bringing in an ERP, and how would you justify its involvement, cost, and pain points? And do you have a preference depending on organizational size? The starting point for this is to do a bit of what I've came up with this today, capability bingo, which is working out what are the complexities that you need to be able to support in your operational model, both now and in the future. So do you need to do pre-orders? Have you got retail stores? Do you have your own warehouse, or does your 3PL use a WMS? I think you need to look at all of these things. And some of these often mean that you need to be considering the use of an ERP. The ones that in particular will become key for ERP, pre/forward allocation. An example of this would be as if I sold garden furniture, and my customers order my garden furniture whilst I place the PO of my factory in China, and I want to give my customers an estimated delivery date on the website, but the product's, it's on the ocean. But when they order, I want them to order a specific item that's already on a PO, so that if my purchase order is delayed by 2 days, I can change my purchase order delivery date. And I will, at that point in time, know exactly which customers are going to have their orders delayed, so that I can inform them all. So that, for me, is really difficult to solve without an ERP. And as such, it actually resulted in me implementing an ERP with pretty much a startup brand that was a spin-off of an existing business. So they had a bit of cash, but I just couldn't see a way around enabling that particular workflow without one. And then these other bits, so raw materials, in-house production, works orders. I mean, this is almost, this is the core ERP or MRP kind of zone. Probably it's worth distinguishing there, because you've kind of got two types of systems being called an ERP in the e-commerce space. One is a genuine ERP, which is a financials based ERP. So it's got financial systems at its core. And those systems often have the MRP, so raw materials, bill of materials, works orders functionality built into them. That's the category that something like NetSuite would sit in. On the other hand, you've got systems like Brightpearl, for example, that don't have any of the financials capability in them, and they don't have the MRP functionality, so they can't do the works orders, raw material functionality either. But it tends to be that if you need to do works orders and you've got raw materials, it's quite likely that you're going to be considering an MRP. And as a result of that, most of the MRP, material resource planning, sorry to confuse everyone with another acronym, materials resource planning is often kind of a synonym for ERP. The other thing that can often tip it is not multiple warehouses, but the need to transfer orders or move inventory between warehouses. So having the capability to raise a transfer order and move stock from, say, you've got stock in your UK warehouse, but a customer in America buys it, and you want to raise a transfer order to send it to your US warehouse to then ship it out to the customer with the rest of their items. So I guess like complex inventory movements is also another common trigger for it. Would any of these force ERP? Multi-warehouse can, and I'd say even like the transfer orders, move inventory, you could do that without an ERP. And I also think it's worth just thinking about, do you really need one of those full-scale ERPs, or would something like a Deer Systems or a Brightpearl do the job versus going all in on the financials model of NetSuite? Working with a client at the minute who's doing 18 million revenue, and the quote that came back for NetSuite plus Soligo, the integration platform, came back at 252,000 euros. So one of the things that you really do need to think about if you do go down the ERP route is that it's more than likely that you're going to need to buy an integration platform or iPaaS as part of that investment. And if you are told that you don't need to buy one, you really need to dig into the integration spec. Because even I have been caught out with ERP to Shopify integration spec in the last 12 months. It really isn't straightforward understanding exactly how those workflows work. And one of the biggest downsides of ERP, which I didn't understand in terms of it being a transactional system. So I guess the main distinguisher of an ERP is that it starts logging transactions. So it becomes the transactional system of record. So when you sell something, it raises a sales invoice. And likewise, when you purchase something, it's doing the same. Is that because of that transactional nature, it makes it hard to then do things like edit orders in Shopify, or if you edit an order in the ERP, it makes it quite hard for it to then push that update into Shopify. And what that means is you often end up having to do things in two places, and that can create a bit of a customer service burden that you may not have thought about or forecast for. And it's certainly something I didn't really realize much at all. How to justify its involvement? Has anyone got any questions on that? So I think ERP is quite a popular topic. When to ERP, when not to ERP.
I've got a question. You talked about iPaaS then. What's the kind of biggest use case for that? I'm not really too familiar with that type of tech.
So integration platforms are a way of enabling you to connect two systems together that don't have an off-the-shelf plugin. If
like a middleware of sorts.
Yes, but it's basically providing a middleware. And I think the nature of most tech stacks now is that you're going to end up with a few systems that aren't integrated. And, integration automation is a huge opportunity. Probably integration automation is probably a bigger opportunity right now for e-commerce companies than using AI to write some product descriptions, although that can be quite cool. Because there's kind of two actual, you think of something really simple like Shopify Flow can enable a bit of automation, but there's also, solutions like Mate and Zapier, which are sort of really common within most software vendors, and most web agencies would be using those tools, often not being used inside e-commerce businesses. And then likewise, you've got those kind of more enterprise like iPaaS solutions. And they certainly come into the fray once you're trying to connect two systems together, like NetSuite and Shopify. The off-the-shelf connectors. I think Shopify launched an ERP program. The ERP connectors that are on that ERP program are not fit for purpose, in my opinion, for Shopify merchants that are trying to scale, because they're not going to take care of the nuances of their business. And when you've got NetSuite and Shopify are chalk and cheese, really from a tech perspective. And the NetSuite API is getting on a little bit now, whereas Shopify are working in GraphQL. And with iPaaS, you really want to try and be buying in two things. So one of the things I'd be looking for with an iPaaS is have they got a pre-built solution? Have they done it before? and therefore have they got lots of references? And then the other thing that you really want to be buying in is the knowledge of the platform. So if you're going with an iPaaS that's never worked with Brightpearl before, it's likely that they're going to find that a lot more challenging than working with one that's got 200 Brightpearl customers. And usually what you'll find is the ERP salespeople will point you in the direction of the partners, but I've found that often they will try and sell you their existing connectors. They might point you in the direction of specific partners that they get a kickback from, or even in the case of some ERPs, they're selling the iPaaS kind of bundled up on their contract. And I'm particularly wary of that. The idea that because you're on the paperwork of an ERP vendor with an iPaaS, that somehow you're going to get some, they're going to manage things for you. The reality is, if things break, you're going to be in touch with the iPaaS directly, trying to deal with those issues. So there's no reason to give away any money to the ERP vendor for a third-party solution like an iPaaS. You should just work with those vendors directly. What I've got down there, this is basically my workshop framework. So when I go into brands and I'm looking at understanding the technology roadmap and identifying the issues across the teams, I obviously go in and visualize the as-is tech stack. I'm on a mission to gather together all the different Google Sheets and what they're being used for. And I use this framework when I'm in the session. So I work out who is responsible for each of the operational functions. And then all I do on the sessions, I record them all. And whilst I'm on the sessions, as issues come up, they will get added as a post-it note going from left to right. And then as we get towards the kind of back end of the session, I always make sure I ask the people I'm workshopping, like, do you have any solutions in mind for doing this? I think that's a really obvious question that I didn't ask at first. I just kind of assumed I was going to have to come up with all the answers. Often they've already got ideas or they've been down a certain track, and you can just enable them in going a bit further with that initial idea. And the bits that I try and then think about in terms of work streaming, this is kind of a key part of this, is to then try and organize the issues that come up under kind of 3 different work streams, which result in you taking specific action. So the first one is it a vendor or solution issue? So is the thing that they've come up with them just sort of bitching about a vendor, saying, oh, they're not responsive, or that thing's broken, or whatever? And if that's the case, great. Pretty straightforward. We're just going to get on a call with the vendor. We're going to talk it through, try and get to the bottom of that particular issue. The other work stream that I pick out is basically inventory. So it could be inventory, order management, but primarily it's about inventory. It's inventory from goods inbound all the way through to goods going out the door. That's a really specific work stream that obviously impacts the customer experience in particular. And I try and get everything organized around that work stream. It usually has a certain group of people working on it. The other one I look at is product lifecycle. So I spend that year going very, very deep into product lifecycle. That the way that this usually surfaces for people is they want to get products to market faster, or they want to have more consistent launches. They're not bringing new styles to market in the way that they wanted. So the product life cycle is starting to break down. And then the fourth one is integration. That's kind of how I break it out. I've got like examples in here of kind of typical bits that come up with all of these different parts. And what I'll also do is take these quirks and put them down and then build out from there. So if someone says, right, we've got retail stores, then I'll start adding on the points around retail stores and then making advice from there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Oliver. Does anybody have any last questions here? We have a couple minutes left.